Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we are thrilled to have a huge number of participants joining us on our webinar series, Peer Reviews. In today's edition of Peer Reviews, we are focusing on medical writer insights on GenAI in regulatory writing. I'm your moderator, Ravi Ramchandran, co-founder and chief scientific officer of Peer.ai, where we are working on a day-to-day basis on the frontiers of GenAI and how that's transforming life sciences clinical development. We've started on the nuts and bolts of how to apply GenAI to regulatory medical writing, and we are excited to share practical insights that we're learning as we walk the walk on today's webinar. Learn more about Peer.ai and what we are up to at www.GetPeer.ai. With that, let's get this webinar started. As a society, we are living in a time of unprecedented change where generative AI is transforming the medical writing landscape. You are here, like all of us, because you want to know how to harness the power of AI to supercharge your work. You're in luck if that's your intent, because I'm really thrilled to have an all-star industry panel of experts who will share their insights and perspectives on navigating the challenges and advantages of generative AI in regulatory medical writing. Please join me in welcoming our fantastic panel. They are truly innovators in this space, the best in the business, and they're here to share their secrets, most of their secrets. You'll get to hear their thoughts on how to thrive in this rapidly evolving landscape, and maybe pick up a few tips on how you can become an AI whisperer yourself. Now, nothing in life is free, and so we'd love for you, the audience, to also participate by putting in your questions using the Q&A function in this webinar, and ask the panelists all the burning questions you have about use of generative AI, use of GenAI in regulatory writing, etc. We will tackle your questions in the second half of this webinar, and don't be shy. We're all here to learn from each other. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. So this webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the recording later with all the registrants on this webinar. And of course, a friendly reminder that our panelists' views are their own and do not reflect their organization's opinions. With that, let's get the conversation started. I'll stop sharing my screen so we can actually see and hear from the panelists. And Rand, you are first up on my screen, so I'm going to ask you to kick us off with your intro.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rand Miller. I'm the head of medical writing at Icon Therapeutics, which is a small but rapidly growing pharmaceutical company based on both coasts. I got my start in medical and regulatory writing in mid to large size pharma, and then did a stint as a consulting medical writer for a number of years. And my clients consist of pretty much the entire range of company size, therapeutic area, et cetera. Yeah, I think I will hold off on my sort of interest in AI until after intros, but I have great interest in it.
Good. So thank you, Rand. I think, Ariel, you're next up.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Ariel Brown, head of medical writing at Rapport Therapeutics, which, like Rand's organization, is small but growing. I have been in roles in medical writing and clinical development over the past, it's been almost 15 years at this point. Talk about change, but I'm very glad to be here. I've been working with Peer for the past 6 months or so. I have a very keen interest in the way technology impacts our industry and impacts our attitudes. We will definitely get into that. I'll try not to get too deep, but thank you very much for having me. And also want to say hi to all the Sage folks that are on the call. Thanks for joining. They're my old friends and colleagues.
Meagan?
Hey everybody, my name is Meagan Eldridge. I've been a medical writer for 10 years and worked on both the contract and sponsor sides of the industry. Having partnered with a lot of different teams over the years, my favorite experiences are the ones that have come through working really closely with cross-functional teams on high priority clinical and regulatory strategic documents. And so with that in mind, I started a medical writing consultancy in 2023 that's built around agile medical writing leadership to produce quality documents and creatively help our clients reach their submission goals. On the personal side of things, my husband and I have 3 kids, ages 7, 5, and 18 months, and we're Eastern North Carolina natives. So we're here on family land. We built a house recently too.
Thanks, Megan. So as you can see, the panelists are truly the experts in their fields, and I'm looking forward to having a very lively discussion. And with that, maybe to tee up the questions, I'd love to ask the panel, what are your own individual experiences with the use of generative AI? Have you used GenAI in either your personal or professional lives? And if you could share what those experiences have been like, whether positive or negative, that would be great. Maybe this time around, I'll start in reverse order. Megan, if you want to go first.
Sure. I think generative AI is a new thing for a lot of us, right? So my experience is probably similar, I would guess, to a lot of our audience in that we're hearing a lot about AI. We might be dabbling in it some in our personal lives. For me, I have played around with it some on non-client work, but haven't really delved into its full capacity yet. So I'm excited to learn with you guys from my co-panelist here as well as we think about how these generative AI platforms can be used for implementation in regulatory writing.
Great. Anybody wants to go next?
Sure, I'll jump in the spirit of
Awesome.
backwards order. Generative AI. So I use ChatGPT a lot in my personal life. A lot of the times I do it for fun, like creative meme generation. I have created actually the logo for my consultant company. I created other. I actually like to play a lot with the images, but also just pretty much anything that needs a creative spark. Like I will say, what movies should I watch with my children tonight? They are X years old. They're this. My son's favorite thing is he always says to me, can you ask ChatGPT to generate 10 trivia questions about Godzilla? And so it's like it feels very open in terms of a creative sort of a spirit that can be generated from the content in there. I use it mostly for fun, as I said. In business, I ask it questions. Just yesterday, I was on a call and I was asking it about AMA versus APA reference and citation style. But I would say 95% of what I use it for is personal.
Oh, cool. Rand?
Yeah, I think we were just talking before the call started about what a 13-year-old uses GPT for. I think my initial reaction when it was first announced publicly was fairly similar, but I immediately realized that a limitation of publicly available LLMs was that you tended to get repetitive responses, but that also led me to believe that in fact it might be very good for my day job of medical writing, because there is a lot of repetitive processes that take place. There's a lot of things that are incredibly data intensive that maybe question what are the limits of ChatGPT. And plus, if you were reading on the internet what other people were using for, people that were doing a lot of coding, for example, were using it. I almost immediately transitioned into seeing what the limitations or what the uses of GenAI were by doing things like taking tables of publicly available, not confidential safety or efficacy data and plugging them into even the publicly available platforms. And I was actually quite shocked. And if you haven't done this experiment, I would urge you to maybe do it in the background or after this call. But just putting in a New England Journal table of efficacy and safety data, and with very simple prompting, these language models were able to reproduce a lot of the summary information that you would expect a first-year medical writer to do. In fact, maybe even more advanced than that. And so I think that was my initial interest. And I think my involvement in using AI in a professional setting would actually be much more extensive than it currently is if it weren't for the fact that I think it's really poor practice, and so does my legal team, to be putting anything confidential into a publicly available platform. All that is to say, I think I'm happy to entertain questions or comments about the actual practical use in medical writing, but I think there are certain limitations, but the platforms are very powerful.
Awesome. That actually tees us up very nicely. Rand, since you opened the door, I'm going to walk in. A question for the panel, and anybody who wants to dive in, just jump right in. What is the sort of discussion in your own medical writing networks and organizations today about the use or application of GenAI specifically for medical writing? Are there any pain points? And Rand brought it up, don't share your company specific data publicly. What other pain points are there? And what are the promising applications either you've experienced or are being discussed within each of your orgs or within your networks?
So I think a lot of what we're hearing or a lot of what I'm hearing in my medical writing circles is around the idea of draft one, that these models can be used to help us produce draft one. And just piggybacking off of that, the questions that flow are, how good is draft one? And how much time does it take to work through draft one, with the medical writer's eye on it to get it ready to send out. So I think there's just a lot of kind of unknowns right now about how it's going to work and how it's going to make processes more efficient for us as medical writers. And this all being tied to the goal of getting therapies to patients faster, right? So like, how are we implementing it in a way that we're actually capitalizing on that goal?
Thank you for that, Megan. Honestly, I think my conversations have been almost a step behind that. I feel that a lot of when I talk about it or when it comes up in casual conversation is a lot of fear-based comments and questions. And I really think that's really baked into our conversations in popular culture for 200 years. Since Frankenstein's monster, we are afraid of technology and what it will do to us and what it will do to our jobs. But so, yeah, I think it's really about right now, the conversations are like, I can't even get people to think about how to implement or what are the logistical or privacy issues. It's more AI, fear, unknown. And so, I don't know, I think about last year at AMWA, there was a presentation by some of the folks from Wetzel Innovations, and they talked about the Kubler-Ross change curve and the attitudes towards any big change that happens in one's life or in society. And it takes time, and before we can, I think, really accept, we have to go through a stage of fear and of learning. And I think I've been approaching this by playing around with ChatGPT as much as I can and reading as much as I can. And hopefully it will set me up and my teams up for really adapting to what is inevitably happening and continues to happen. But yeah, I think the conversations again are about like, where are we and how do we deal with this big unknown monstrous cloud of AI that's coming. And hopefully I think we are hopefully moving away from ignorance and more towards acceptance and knowledge.
Yeah, Ariel, that's a great point. Just I think yesterday or maybe even today, Accenture came out with this survey of 8 executives across multiple industries. And within that were life sciences execs. And according to at least the C-suite within pharma and biotech, 49% of those surveyed said that they are confident that GenAI investments they made last year and early part of this year are going to outperform all of the other investments that they've made so far within life sciences. So I think you're absolutely right. There was initially I think there's a fear even within our industry in medical writing about what is GenAI going to do. But now I think we're slowly transitioning through to what is the promise of GenAI and what can it do for me and my own work. So yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. We're at an interesting inflection point, and I think we're seeing some of that even in the industry conferences that some of us have been at. But before I jump further ahead, Rand, your views on what is happening within the industry and what you're hearing around?
Yeah, and in fact, I think mine might be the opposite side of that, where you're talking about an inflection point going from fear to promise. I think most of my conversations around this start off with all of this enthusiasm around, okay, I've played with GenAI. I can see how valuable it is. Rand, why don't you just write me protocols with this, for example? There's this promise and there's this idea of how it works, but we work in a heavily regulated environment with confidentiality and data sets that can't just be, and I think not even just confidentiality, but like the fidelity of data is incredibly important. And so then it goes from, oh, we could just do the entire clinical development process in ChatGPT, it would be great, to what are the actual like practical things that need to happen. And I think that's what companies like yours are doing, is trying to put those frameworks in place that go between this wide open wild west of LLMs that are publicly available and slotting that into the carefully regulated and orchestrated process that we have. And then the next step comes, once you even have a framework, how does that fit into the realities of a pharma company, for example, which requires humans to be reviewing things and review comments and edits being propagated into other things? That's like another additional layer of bureaucracy on top of just getting documents put together. So I think it's interesting you talk about it being an inflection from fear to all the promise. I see it a lot as more an intersection of the two, where you've got promise intersecting with the practical nature of it. And that's, I think, right where I'm at right now, is trying to get a sense of what is this really going to look like from a process perspective.
So maybe I can pick up on that, Ryan. So I guess the question then becomes, what does good look like? Or what is good enough in using tools like GenAI in medical writing? So what does good look like? You said we need frameworks around data, protecting data privacy and patient privacy, especially for us when we work in life sciences and we're running clinical trials. Beyond that, what would good look like in terms of either use of the tool or the output from the use of GenAI?
I think this is a part of the webinar that we could talk for hours on. What does that good look like? For me, what's interesting is even an exceptional medical writer who has documents that come together with immediacy and sail through review will frequently, like there will be errors, or there will be mistranscription of values or something like that could slip through. So even if it looks excellent and reads excellently, I think there's a different good that will come out. Gen AI, I think, is going to be very, at least from my perspective, has the potential to be very good at high data fidelity outputs. Mm-hmm. And right now, submit the output of an LLM, it may not read particularly well. It can be hyper redundant. It can have weird, succinct sentences in some places and run-ons in others. But frequently, I think the data itself gets represented with almost perfect fidelity to the source tables and that kind of thing. I think what we consider what looks good is going to evolve over time. But I do think that in a field where quality and high fidelity data representation are key, I think there's the potential for good to be better than it is with all manual writing and retrospective QC, for example.
Right.
Yeah, if I could jump in too. I think what does good look like? You asked it in two different ways. I agree with everything that you're saying, Rand. I think from a quantitative perspective, you're right. AI is not going to copy and paste a number incorrectly in the way that medical writers do all the time, including myself. But so you asked the two questions, which are about what does good look like in terms of use? And I think I look at it in terms of risks and benefits, but I think ultimately bringing on AI is going to be useful if it adds value in terms of saving time and money, saving resource, and improving quality. It's all about the triple constraints and can we make things better, quicker. And in terms of the quality of the output, I think that is related, right? It's like, how much can we increase quality? I will say that where we are at right now, the products across the spectrum that I've seen from output, that is as good as what I would expect to see from a junior medical writer who just is right out of school or just learning the sort of art of and science of medical writing. So I would never hire someone like straight out of a master's or what have you and say, write this IB and distribute it to the whole organization. No, I think you're always going to need to have somebody who knows what to look at work, to review work, and to improve quality. And I think that where AI output is right now, it's good if it helps reduce time, but it will, again, right now, the qualitative stuff, the voice, the way, the preferences of the internal culture of the organization, all of those kinds of things are going to be I think at least the technology that we have now, impossible to train and impossible to give a prompt for. I think, so your question is about good. I think we are striving to get to a place where quality, the benefit of the quality reduces the time and the money. But right now, there needs to be a human involved, a human that is reviewing the work, a human that understands the bounds of what is wanted internally, and in addition to the external regulatory needs, etc.
I'll jump into, so I think when we're talking about good, it depends on what document we're talking about, right? Because not every Gen AI system is going to work for every document. And I think, at least in the circles I've been running in lately, mostly I'm hearing about narratives might be more difficult to use an AI platform to write something like a briefing document or an integrated summary of safety or something like that. It's just a much more complex document. So I think we probably need to factor in the type and complexity of what we're working on. Even something like a very complex phase 3 CSR might be more difficult for a Gen AI model to tackle on the outset. I think with reps, this gets better, especially reps within, a particular organization or, particular style within a program, multiple CSRs or things like that. And then the other thing that might be a little bit sidetracked, but also thinking about the Gen AI platform producing what an early career medical writer can do, I think that's a great thing. And I also think we have to think about training for our early career medical writers, because some of those tasks that the Gen AI platform is now doing are taking away some of those trial and error mistakes that the junior medical writers make and learn from. It's just another thing to think about as we start working on implementation of these models, how it changes not just our documents, but like our workforce landscape.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all three of you are touching upon something that I want to pick up, but before I go there, I'm also mindful that one of my duties as a moderator is also to encourage the audience to submit their questions. I know a lot more people have joined after we kicked off the webinar. So for those who came in late, please submit your questions using the Q&A tool available, and the panel will address those questions in the second half of the webinar. So with that, I actually want to get back to what all three of you actually touched on, which is, at least at this point in time, a tool like a GenAI is functioning like a junior or an entry-level medical writer, and all three of you think there needs to be a human in the loop to QC the output. If I capture the gestalt of that conversation. So what does that human in the loop look like? And what do you think, how will they either help improve the GenAI tooling and capabilities, or do you think there's ever a time when the human in the loop becomes less and less necessary? Provocative question, so there's no right or wrong answer.
I think that, as well as anybody else, that architecture behind how documents come together is in some ways a key component of what we do. So the setting up the architecture of individual documents for right now, I don't think is something that LLMs are doing. And I think that's where companies are clamoring to try to find a foothold in what's the best platform for that kind of overarching architecture of submission documents, for example. But then from there on, let's say that process can get automated, then I think that the architecture surrounding an entire submission and an understanding of that is still going to be important for the human element, because at some point, until we get to a completely automated process where agencies are just interpreting raw data table, there's always going to have to be an intermediary and an interpreter for pitching the interest of the company's interpretation to a regulatory agency, for example. As I think it maybe just will become that we become, as medical writers, become much more heavily involved in the architecture and interpretation and messaging, and less involved in summarizing of data tables, for example, or formatting of tables in a way that highlights key information. But even that, I think that's something that I'm not sure that an LLM, at least in its current iteration, would be able to understand when your SVP of oncology says, I want this table to highlight this information and not that. What is spit up? I don't know. So I think that's, at least in the near term, that's where we're going to continue to be involved.
Yeah, I totally, just to bounce off that, Rand, I think it's really, you hit the nail on the head there with about capturing internal team preferences. And that's something I think we all strive to do with draft one, but typically that's what happens after draft one. We do our best individually as writers to get the key messages in there, but once it's all out on paper, that's when the reviewers really have their chance to give their preferences, to talk about what they want to highlight, what they want to prioritize, deprioritize. And I think that particularly since teams are dynamic and each in any organization, there may be switching team members coming, leaving, business priorities change. There's a lot of different sort of sources of input beyond just the quantitative data that are going to influence what is highlighted and how the documents are structured. And that, I think, requires a human in the loop to take all of those team and corporate priorities, preferences, et cetera, to really form the document into what becomes final. So I do think that is where a human absolutely will always need to be in the loop. I also just want to make one comment about lean writing too. And that's something that I feel like is right now, it's the trends that we're seeing at AMWA, et cetera, is all about like, how does the AI impact things? But like 5, maybe 10 years ago, it was all lean writing. And I think that these two concepts are very much married, because the more lean we are, the more we're going to be able to use the tools to get to a place that we want our documents to be. And so I think where we're at as an industry now, teams still want to see a lot of fluff, and they want to see a lot of interpretation, and they want to see a lot of preferences in there. If we are to get to a place where a CSR is 200 pages of TLFs and 3 pages of the body, I think we can use these tools are going to be implemented in very different ways. We are still not in a place where we are writing lean, I don't think, at least not what I've seen. The less lean, the more human in the loop. I think that's the way it's going to be.
I think too, this conversation around, does a human ever go away, or does the medical writer's job become less valuable? I think the potential use of these tools is a really nice challenge for us as medical writers to really up our game. Right? We're not just people who come in and accept changes from the various functional groups. We're there to essentially own the document throughout the development process of the document and make sure that it reads well, that it's internally consistent, that it makes scientific good sense. We are subject matter experts that's on the team. And so I don't see the implementation of the tool to help us, especially when we're thinking about draft one, I don't see the implementation doing anything to lessen our impact across the whole document development process.
Right. Yeah, I would even go so far as to say it could elevate us. I remember someone saying to me when I first started, oh, people just see medical writers as scientific secretaries. And that always stuck with me. And are we just there to, be the scribe? And, if we have GenAI as the scribe, like, medical writing takes on the sort of scope of our function changes towards what requires a human intelligent mind. So I see it as elevating. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think the most, sorry, Robbie. I would just say that one of the most, I'll say, exhilarating, also painful processes that we do are like running adjudication meetings, for example. I think this is really what you were saying. Navigating that, I think, is something that's largely what you spend much of your time doing and much of your energy doing. I don't know that LLMs are going to be, Robbie, unless you've got something in the works over there at Peer for running adjudication meetings. I think that's going to continue to be an important part of what we do.
Sorry to disappoint you, and no, Peer does not do adjudication meetings, but I do think all of you are bringing up a really great point, which is where the LLMs and GenAI tooling are right now. It takes away more of your tedious tasks. So you don't have to go through 1,500 pages of listings, but it allows you to frees you up to focus on the more fun parts of your jobs. Now, I'm just a GenAI guy, so I don't know what those fun parts are, but can you share 1 or 2 examples where you think where your time is now focused on the more strategic aspects? Besides adjudication meetings, Rand.
I'll jump in. Within our organization, one of the fun things that we do a lot lately is write briefing documents. And so briefing documents are very strategic documents. And
Mhm.
it's really, I so much enjoy getting to work with a cross-functional team, understand their rationale for various things, and be able to take all of those ideas and put them down in writing. And it gives them something to react to. It's actually, I've learned over the years, it's this amazing service for them to have their thoughts written down, because it helps them identify the gaps in their rationale and their thinking. And even when things are not fully baked, it's really fun to lay the groundwork to see things then push along down the road.
Right.
Yeah, I think one play. Oh, sorry, Ravi.
Go for it.
I think one interesting sort of case study here is maybe stepping away from the bulk of what we're talking about. But if you look at an abstract that you write, frequently what we'll do is, my process is talk to all the stakeholders, put together an abstract that's a rough draft, and then if you watch that abstract evolve, I find one of the best parts of the job is the careful crafting of every single word, and somebody decides this word has more. It's almost poetic in a way. This is what you imagine that they were doing in Leonardo da Vinci's day or whatever. And so I think even if you just take out the first draft part, so instead of spending that day putting together a first draft with stakeholder input, but you take stakeholder input and you have a rough draft put in place, the nuances of working with the team to carefully pick the perfect word that most succinctly gets you down to your word count or character count will still remain. And I think that's yeah, part of the fun.
Cool. Yeah, so I noticed, I'm just doing a quick time check. We are about 6 minutes past the 1:30 my time. So we're heading for the home stretch, and please keep the questions coming. I'm going to switch gears slightly. This is a great conversation, and I hate to do this, but I have to keep the webinar moving. So riffing off of what the three of you just shared, in terms of change and how these tools might be more effectively used, do the three of you see the role of the medical writer changing in that? How do we now wrap GenAI into our arsenal of tools? Or what new skills or training do you think medical writers will need to more effectively leverage these tools like GenAI or LLMs?
Yeah, I think about the most successful medical writers that I have seen, and they know how to use language effectively. They understand the regs. They can do stakeholder management. But I do think that technology is a big piece of it, that, effectively using tech, whether it be Microsoft Word or templates or tools that automation tools or QC tools. I think there's, no matter where we are, what year it is, there's always going to be new tech. And I think that role is that aspect of the function is going to become more important. It's not about, this sort of like being able to sift through listings after listing, like that type of a sustained attention maybe will become less important than being able to effectively write a prompt or effectively be able to quickly learn a new tool and that can provide you with automation. So yeah, I would say, I know when I had someone start working for me earlier this year, and we were looking for development opportunities for her, and I was like, it's all about tech. You want to be ready for the next thing, take a Gen AI course. And I think that having those core technical skills to be able to shorten the learning curve for new technology as it comes out is going to become increasingly more important in medical writing, but also in every industry, let's be honest.
Yeah.
I think too that in addition to the tech piece, we're gonna have, as medical writers, need to be more like visionary in how we think about our documents, right? Because if we're using an AI system to set up a draft one, then we're gonna have to know what we want that draft one to look like. And so I think that forethought that goes into doing whatever it is in the early stages of the use of the AI, that we also would have to learn. We have to think about the output too as we're training our medical writers. And I think probably things that they're going to be doing less and less manually, they're still going to have to be learning how does it look on the other end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be great from a process perspective to just be able to write LLMs into your process. If you look at the way our field has progressed, there was a time at which you would have had to go off and read the guidance for every document type, or have more or less have an internal idea of what documents would look like. Now we just have everything is templated. I know for years there's been structured content that has been another layer on top of templating. And then now here we have content generation within that. So I see this as an extension of templates and an extension of this meandering process to get to where we are. And I think as far as I'm concerned, my vision would be that you just have this written in as part of your process. And a junior medical writer, for example, would basically become a architecture builder within the template and a prompt learning how to navigate prompting for the desired outcome, as opposed to what you typically, I think, do is take a junior medical writer and give them the simpler tasks first and then build on complexity and give them more complex document types. I think here it's just, you just train at a different stage in the process and with slightly different skills. But yeah, I see this as just would be great to just start building this into processes as within an organization.
Thank you, all three of you. I certainly learned something from that. Meagan, now the questions are starting to roll in, and this one is specifically for you. What are your customers asking for with respect to GenAI as you talk to them within your practice? And I'm going to add a corollary to that question for both Rand and Ariel. What are your stakeholders looking for when you are championing the use of GenAI within your own org? So we'll start with Meagan, and then the two of you can pile in.
Yeah, so we're starting to have some preliminary conversations with some of our clients around the use of GenAI. I think that, being that my group is a startup consultancy, right? We've spent most of the past year building our client base and really serving those clients really well. And so now we're moving into our next phase of growth within the company. And I think that GenAI is definitely on the table for the taking there. And as we've, built relationships with our current clients, and we're thinking about how we can serve them more efficiently as we continue working with them, these are conversations we're starting to try to suss out a little bit and figure out at what points in our current processes and our current ways of working can we maybe leverage some of these AI platforms that would help us move even faster.
I can say that I've had zero conversations about AI in my organization. I think it's seen as at the top of the hierarchy of needs, and part of that is where my organization is right now. The medical writing department is 3 months old, and so it's things like style guides and templates come first. But I would say that it is generally the vibe that I've been picking up across multiple organizations is like, this could be a nice to have to experiment with and see if maybe it could work for us. But yeah, no, we're definitely not there in terms of anybody asking for it. It's more about the output. And I think that a lot of times it's medical writers, you figure that out, your process. It's up to you what happens before draft one. Yeah, we haven't gotten to anything automated yet.
I think the stakeholders that I have come across are aware of the fact that a huge component of clinical development is documentation. You sit in a lot of meetings, it's hard to quantify that, but the bottom line is you have mountains and mountains of digital paperwork. And so there's a strong push to minimize the amount of time and effort spent on those mountains and mountains of documentation. And I think then the counter to that is, or a problem with that is, let's say you generate those mountains of documentation faster, that just puts more of the review burden on the higher ups in the company, because you're just going to be shuttling things through faster. And then I think the counter to that, which is where I've maybe been harping on this throughout, is that review burden can in fact be minimized as long as you build LLMs or use LLMs appropriately so that the quality of the things that are coming to reviewers is trustworthy. Then really, I think then you remove all of those roadblocks, then there is higher throughput. But yeah, I think throughput, quality, and minimizing time and effort is at the forefront of people's minds, at least in my organization.
Awesome. There are a couple of really great questions coming through. So I'm going to shift gears and start moving us towards answering those questions. So this is fabulous. One of our attendees asked, I lead a medical writing team at a mid-sized pharma, and we are looking into bringing GenAI more broadly into our org. Do you have any advice for getting buy-in from my leadership team? I know what the short answer is, but this is not a pitch for Peer.ai, so I'm not going to answer that question. Rand, Ariel, Meagan?
I can answer from my own personal experience. A great way to demonstrate value is to do what I opened with, which is take non-confidential data and run it through a public platform and demonstrate that, in fact, the outputs are exactly what stakeholders are expecting to see out of a medical writer. Now, you run the risk of someone, if they're really cost conscious, seeing that as a way of subverting or getting rid of medical writing, but I don't think that's usually the case. But the bottom line is, I think you can very quickly and easily demonstrate the value of even the public platforms, and then that leads you down the rabbit hole of, okay, then how do you get a firewalled version of an LLM that you can use for proprietary information? How do you use it effectively? But just quickly and a quick and dirty demonstration of the fact that they do exactly what we need to do in regulatory and medical writing is important.
Meagan, Ariel?
Yeah, I guess I can just say I agree. It's all about demonstration of value add, but that's going to come from educating yourself first. And Pure as obviously has great tools. There are other competitor organizations that have great tools. I think the more that we can learn and ourselves and have a grasp on the added value ourselves, the more convincing that we're going to be in terms of the demonstration. And I agree with Rand, like the more you can show people rather than just tell them, the more convincing you're going to be. So education, experimentation, and then putting together the case.
So show, not tell. Okay, I guess as a follow-up, I'd love to ask this question since this is of interest to me. When we do set up those show, not tell sorts of projects, proof of concept, pilots, what have you, what are the metrics by which you would judge the output of an LLM? Is it time? Is it cost savings? Is it resources saved? Is it quality? Or is it none of the above, all of the above? What resonates most for you as a medical writer leading within your orgs?
I think this is going to, at least in the near next few years, is going to be a two-part thing. I think number one is demonstrating quality first, quality and data fidelity. So until you can convince people who are used to reviewing documents that what's coming out of an LLM is identical, more or less, to what they're expecting, you're never going to get any further. And then once that trust has been built, and it's weird to use the word trust with respect to a computer program, but nevertheless, once that trust has been built, I think then it's going to switch toward throughput and speed. But before that, who cares how fast or high throughput something is if it's garbage that's being run through it?
Ariel, Meagan, do you want to add to that?
I think it comes down to, like you said, quality, and also how much time does it actually save? Having not run with the AI platforms in any of my client work right now, I can't speak to does it actually save overall time. What we're hearing is it saves time to draft one, but does it save time once I go to look at the draft one that it created and I prep it for my clients to a point where I'm satisfied with the output? I think those questions linger at the moment, but as the models get better and more bespoke for our needs, I think that they will be answered.
You know, you bring up a really good point, Meagan, which is about a sort of a more comprehensive evaluation of value add. Because sure, you could say you get to draft one, let's say you cut that in half. But then I also think about like, how much time do I spend working with my contracts team, getting a new writer on board? How much time do I spend with finance or with interviewing people so it's like, I think that there is a larger impact than just time to draft one that we could be considering when we think about the risks and benefits. So I don't even remember your question, Robbie, but that you led me down that thought path. So thanks.
Okay, this is great. Jenny Pickett, who's one of our audience members, she's the first one to be courageous enough to attach her name to this. So I'm just going to give a shout out to Jenny. She said, Ariel, thanks for shouting out my AMBER talk. My question for the panel is whether they're planning for AI use on the reader side. So this is an interesting path. Health authorities have long been talking about using AI for review. Are we thinking about how our documents are summarized by AI and how to write so that our key messages are coming through?
So I actually have attempted something using GenAI for digestion of information and summarizing. And I was met with very mixed results that involved a lot of what are referred to as hallucinations, where what the information that it was summarizing and telling me was completely false, just completely fabricated. So that's probably a function of the size of the information that I was trying to process and the fact that I was using a previous iteration of ChatGPT that I don't know, it certainly wasn't the cutting edge, I think 4.0 or whatever, 4.0, whatever, however you refer to it. Nevertheless, it was not successful in a practical setting yet in a way that the errors that it was spitting out were such egregious fabrications, but that sounded really correct that it was very scary. My response.
Right.
I think that's a really great question, and I don't have an answer for you. It prompts in my mind, though, does the use of that require us to be more consistent across the industry in how we write our documents? And things like the ICH M11 protocol template that's in draft form right now, would those types of harmonization across the industry enable us to make our documents more AI reader friendly, and just thinking about how we implement that as an industry.
All right. So I'm going to switch gears yet again because this has been a wide-ranging discussion. So I'm going to take full liberties as a moderator. So question came in from the audience, thanking all three of you for your insights. And also the question was, what advice do you have for medical writers to prepare, quote unquote, prepare for GenAI, especially for those of us who are earlier in their careers?
Yeah, I think experimentation is like a great start. Like Rand was saying, that I haven't gone so far as to see how it produces tables and whatnot, but I think just getting to know it, like anything else, more knowledge is power. It's ChatGPT is available to everyone. It's a large language model that is, I think, conceptually similar to a lot of what you're going to be facing in the business world. Have fun with it. I have so much fun with it. And it feels like the sort of outcome of that is that I also am preparing myself for knowing how to talk about it and knowing the capabilities and the limitations. And I think experimenting is just a great place to start. And then, of course, there are seminars, webinars like you're on, and there are more formal types of learning situations as well. The more you can get involved in the conversation, the better. That's what I would say.
I think too, you can't forget your fundamentals. So even though we have these really cool technologies coming on board, like if you don't know what a CSR is supposed to look like, you're not prepared to enter the field. So I would spend at least as much time, if not more, focusing on just your overall education of what medical writing is and what documents should look like, and do your best to get your hands on the actual documents so you can look at them and read them.
Yeah.
I have nothing to add to that. They both said it so eloquently.
Awesome. So I'll just add to the panel's advice and say, as a cautionary note, please don't upload your clinical data into any of these open source LLMs, please. You will run into trouble. Your career might end quicker than you foresee if you do that. But experiment, have fun, play with it. That's how you learn, and that's how at least I learn. And that actually brings me up to the time. We are at the top of the hour, and this was a fabulous discussion. So thank you, Rand, Meagan, Ariel, and also the attendees for your questions. We are, at least all of us here are excited to continue to explore the possibilities of GenAI in medical writing. And if you want to stay up to date on our latest developments, visit our website, www.GetPeer.ai. And thanks again, everyone. Thanks to my panelists for a wonderful discussion, and hope you all stay safe and be healthy. Take care.